ate the apple? What happened?
I don't know.
Who ate the whole apple? What happened?
I don't know.
Allah ate it. Allah ate it.
Because he was too stupid.
Excuses.
Thousands. Who ate the apple? What happened?
I don't know.
Who ate the whole apple? What happened?
I don't know.
Allah ate it. Allah ate it.
Because he was too stupid.
Excuses.
Thousands. Who ate the apple? What happened?
I don't know.
Who ate the whole apple? What happened?
I don't know.
Allah ate it. Allah ate it.
Because he was too stupid.
Excuses.
Thousands. Who ate the apple? What happened?
All right. We are live, everyone. Welcome back to Reasoned Answers, your home for all your favorite
crackhead clown individuals.
Today, we're going to be talking about something you've probably never heard of, but apparently has been going on for a couple decades. Something called Texas Muslim Capital Day. Apparently, either annually or biannually, they can't even seem to get their own documentation straight, but I'm pretty sure it's biannually, so every other year. A organization, which turns out to just be a front for CAIR, isn't actually an independent organization, organizes a rally at the Texas State House Capitol to show just how important Muslims are and how much political power they have. This year, there was plans for a protest at that event. Because of the planned protest, CAIR demanded there be a massive showing, huge crowds turn out, and, well, no one turned out. I mean, technically some people turned out, but I would say somewhere around like 24 people on average at any given time, maybe like 50 or 100 people total at some point during the event. Not very large crowds. However, a woman who we'll get to in a little bit, who is a firebrand. She's known for running for office in the state of Missouri and having such controversial campaign tactics that she was known primarily for people criticizing her campaign tactics rather than any position that she actually held. Anyway, she got up on stage and started saying some things about Islam. This video clip has gone viral, had 2.5 million views as of last night. I didn't see how many it has now, but probably certainly over 3 million, could be 4 million, right? 5 million, I don't know. So the actual event, as intended, drew approximately zero attention, but because someone got up on stage and said some things about Islam, that has gone viral, and now there is some attention behind that. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad that you are here. Freitag says, have you watched Friendly Ex-Muslim video about the conversation between Aisha and Ali? Not only did I watch it, I recommended other people watch it on a community post. Yes, Valentina Gomez. Obviously, I'm going to talk about her, but she's not going to be till later on. We're going to be talking about the event first, but yes, we will be talking about Valentina. That is correct. Oh, I see that. People were just clarifying that. Yes, okay, cool. It's also in the video description. So I'm not trying to hide anything here. What happens when a clip goes viral exactly? So, I mean, viral just means that it accumulates a large amount of views in a short amount of time, way more than would be expected based on the popularity of, say, the person releasing it. So, for me, releasing a video that gets 20,000 views in a few days might be considered viral. Now, if Valentina has like 400,000 subscribers or followers on Twitter. For her, if it got 200, 300, 400,000 views, that would be just normal. But getting 2.5 million views would be considered viral. So viral just means that it gets way more views than expected. People are sharing it. People are talking about it. People think that something notable happened here. All right, so let's get right into it. And I forgot to share my screen before we got started, so let me just do that now. Give me 1 second. I should have done this beforehand, but I forgot, so shame on me. Amateur operation here and all that. All right. So here we got the news coverage. There's zero news coverage that I could find, local, national, otherwise, on the event itself. Just a couple news stories from, let's just say, click farming organizations. Not necessarily disreputable, but just organizations that publish stories on literally anything they can find because they are looking for maximum clicks, and they have tons and tons of ads on their pages. But in any case, all those articles are about Valentina, not about the event itself. So the first question is, what is Texas Muslim Capital Day? You can see some pictures from past events here. You can see, at least in these selected shots, a significant number of people turned up. You'll see from the clip of this year's that was definitely not the case this time around. Definitely were not a significant number of people there. Let's just go and read what this is all about, according to the Texas Muslim Capital Day organization. TMCD is a biannual event that brings together hundreds of Texas Muslims at the state capitol in Austin. The day features meetings with elected officials, a rally in front of the Capitol, and a congregational prayer. Organized in collaboration with Texas Muslim organizations, Islamic centers, and community groups, TMCD empowers Muslims to become more civilly engaged and amplify their voices in the legislative process. There's also a separate track for youth in the 11th and 12th grade, and then some information on how to get involved. But then if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, TMCD are events coordinated by CAIR Texas offices of Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, and San Antonio. So in other words, this organization holding this biannual event is in fact just CAIR, right? They're just pretending like there is an additional group behind here. The only contact addresses listed are in fact CAIR addresses. So they're not like super hiding it or anything, but they also are kind of trying to imply that it's something different. Now, as I said, there was a call to protest against this event this year, and as a result, CAIR put out the following press release. CAIR Action and Partner, CAIR Texas, urge massive turnout for Texas Muslim Capital Day in response to anti-Muslim hate rally planned by extremist group. CAIR Action Texas today called on Texas Muslims and allies of all faiths and backgrounds to turn out for Texas Muslim Capital Day on April 29th after anti-Muslim extremists called on bigots to assemble outside the Texas Capitol to disrupt Muslim civil engagement and demonize Texas Muslims. Every year, hundreds of Texas Muslims visit the Texas Muslim capital to meet their elected officials and discuss policy issues of importance to the community, including civil rights, freedom of speech, religious freedom, definitely not freedom of speech, they definitely don't care about that, and racial equality. By the way, civil rights encompasses religious freedom and racial equality, as well as other things that they don't care about, so they're just being repetitive there. Earlier this week, the notorious anti-Muslim hate group known as RARE called on anti-Muslim extremists to rally outside the Texas state capitol in an attempt to disrupt Texas Muslim Capital Day. The hate group has also been circulating false information to Texas legislators, attacking CAIR, the nation's largest civil rights organization, and broader Texas Muslim community. In a statement, CAIR Actions Advocacy and Policy Coordinator Shamia Rizvi said, CAIR Action Texas encourages all Texas Muslims and our neighbors of all faiths and backgrounds to join us at the Texas State Capitol on April 29th to both promote civic engagement and stand up to hate. Every Texan has the constitutional right to petition the government, and we must not allow hate groups to threaten any community's right to visit the Texas State Capitol. To be clear, Rare Foundation is not a credible organization. It is an extremist, conspiracy-driven website known for promoting anti-Muslim bigotry, disinformation, and far-right nationalism. Its founder, Amy Meck, has been publicly exposed for a role in inciting online hate and amplifying xenophobic narratives. Rare's hatred of Islam is so extreme that even interviewed, platformed, and praised Talib Abdul Mohsen, an anti-Muslim Saudi atheist who went on to commit horrific Christmas market massacre attack in Germany. This hate group's targeting, again, guilt by association here, right? Now, to be fair, I don't actually know what Rare said about this, and I'm not commenting on them. But I also know I can't trust CAIR, right? Because according to CAIR, I am an individual who is unworthy, cannot be trusted to hold any job whatsoever because I criticize Islam. So I also can't take their characterization for granted. I think we get the point, right? Oh, these people are really, really bad. You should hate them. Everyone needs to turn out. Do you think that Muslim cowboy was there? Probably not, considering how tiny the crowd was. Yeah, who is Rare? That's a good question. Well, let's take a look at the Rare press release a day or two after that CAIR put out this thing, calling for these massive protests. Oh, actually, it might be before. I think that this date's wrong, though. I'm pretty sure it was actually after. The date says it's before, but I'm pretty sure the date is wrong. CAIR Muslim Capital Day protest canceled after Christian women targeted by intimidation campaign. Now, remember, CAIR alleged that Rare, which I assume what the acronym was, chosen to make fun of CAIR. I don't think that's a coincidence, right? I think they are explicitly against CAIR. But in any case, I don't know anything about this organization. I'm not standing up for them. But let's just read what they say about the organized protest, all right? Protest canceled. Why was this canceled? A group of courageous Christian women representing two grassroots organizations, Accountability Matters and Defending Our Republic. Wait a minute. I thought that Rare organized this event. But in fact, it was organized by Accountability Matters and Defending Our Republic, whoever those groups are. So they're not even being honest about who organized the so-called protest against them. But they've been forced to cancel their peaceful protest originally planned for April 29th at the Texas State Capitol. I thought that all people had the right to petition their congressmen or their state representatives for their point of view, but apparently not. Apparently only Muslims are allowed to have that right, according to CAIR. What was their crime? Besides ripping down my green screen. Cat did that, obviously. What was their crime? Daring to peacefully speak out against the Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR, a group with documented ties to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, which is true. They do have documented ties to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. I suppose that's probably the baseless attacks against CAIR. The documented proof that they have ties to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, according to the United States government, under the administration of Barack Obama and Joe Biden. Hardly far-right extremists, okay? So CAIR has ties to these terrorist organizations, according to the U.S. government. Far-right extremists, I guess. Following the announcement of their protest, these women were immediately targeted by a coordinated campaign of threats, smears, and inflammatory rhetoric, spearheaded by CAIR Action Texas, CAIR Texas, and their far left political allies. The women, motivated not by hate, but for love for Texas, for truth, and for America's founding principles, organized the protest to raise awareness about CAIR's extensive connections to foreign terrorist organizations, its political infiltration of Texas institutions, and its attempts to silence dissent through lawfare and media manipulation. Hey, wait a minute. That's what I stand for. I mean, not for Texas specifically, but that's what I stand for. Exposing CAIR's extensive connections to foreign terrorist networks, check. Its political infiltration of local institutions, check. And its attempts to silence dissent through lawfare and media manipulation. Hey, how was I silenced? Well, I mean, I wasn't actually silenced, but why was I fired? Oh, right, because of the appeals to local congressmen, city officials, elected city officials, illegally, I might add, using their influence as elected officials to threaten my employer with loss of funding if they didn't fire me. And through what? Media manipulation, getting the local newspaper to write inflammatory comments about me. This seems to be an accurate description of CAIR from my own experience and my own research on their actual connections to known terrorist organizations like Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. According to far-right extremists? No, according to the administration of Barack Obama and Joe Biden. So what exactly is the problem here, right? What exactly is the extremist? What exactly is the hatred? That's simple facts about how CAIR operates. Simple facts about how CAIR operates. Yeah, apparently I'm a far-right guy who spews nonsense and hate. And right? Even though I don't make political statements and on this channel, we're going to have to touch on politics a little, but when I talk about Valentina, you decide whether I sound like a far-right extremist or not, okay? Because I might have some negative comments about her. But I'm basically politically neutral in reality, right? I basically don't care about politics. I think they're all criminals, they're all crooks, and I don't think that one side is like Mr. Right and the other side's Mr. Wrong. They're all losers, right? All of our elected officials are losers. That's my opinion anyway. So I don't really give a crap about who is elected because I don't expect any of them to look out for what's right. I guess that makes me an extremist, disliking politicians, even though, that's the vast majority. Sorry, I forgot to make this text bigger. What the vast majority of Americans would share that opinion. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't also support their side in the conflict or whatever you want to call it. But they would support the idea that politicians can't be trusted and whatnot. Instead of engaging in civil debate, right? So this group of people, which would probably only have, represented a few dozen people who plan to tune up, instead of just having them show up and then challenging them to debate or ignoring them. No, CAIR's response was to smear these Christian women as extremists and bigots, using intimidation tactics more common to repressive regimes than to American democracy, which is exactly what they did against me as well, right? They had their experts describe how I can't be trusted because I talked to Robert Spencer. To disagree with him, mind you, but I talked to Robert Spencer, and that was highly problematic. Who would do such a thing? Well, apparently only far-right extremist nut jobs like myself, or something. Hey, we got Mohammed Afridi permanently blocked for the 1 millionth time on this channel. Congratulations, Mohammed Afridi. You have been blocked yet again. By the way, when you create your next new account, do let me know if you are Big Mahmood, because I'm pretty sure you are. And I'm also pretty sure that you don't actually care about Islam in the slightest, that you are totally an apostate, an atheist, just in here to play games and get attention. Let's go ahead and continue on here. In a public statement on April 25th. Okay, so the top said April 23rd, but obviously this article was not written April 23rd, was in fact incorrect, like I said, because they're referencing the statement from CAIR, which I just read here. They want a massive turnout to stand up to hate, mischaracterizing the peaceful Christian women as dangerous extremists simply for exercising their constitutional rights. Now, again, I don't actually have any proof. Well, I guess no one does, right? Because they didn't actually show up. I don't have any proof what these Christian women would have done. However, I do know that CAIR is lying because it wasn't organized by RARE, which they said it was. It was organized by Accountability Matters and Defending Our Republic, two other groups. Therefore, if I can't even trust them to identify who organized this, I certainly can't trust them to tell me what the content of their speech, which they didn't even get a chance to give, would have been. So, getting about 0% in reliability from the CAIR press release, I would say. And again, I don't know anything about RARE. I don't know if I would agree with their tactics and their representation of Islam or not. I don't know, right? I am not defending them. I'm not saying that they're a good organization. All I know is all I have is CAIR's word that they are bad guys. And if you click on, say, the Islam, I did look at their website, that they cover news on a wide variety of topics, not just Islam. And if you click on, say, the Islam tactics here, you got, let's say, Germany's last chance. Only an anti-Islamic government can save the nation. Well, I mean, that's being rather explicit, saying anti-Islamic, but if the government's currently pro-Islam and allowing terrorists in, I mean, how is that ridiculous? And by the way, that's also clearly an opinion piece. Red Green Foot Soldier, Samish Rizva, exposed as CAIR's radical leftist attack dog in Texas. So they have information on her background. That seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to look into. Islamicized Texas. Plano Mosque Adhan is not a call to prayer. It's a declaration of conquest or something like that. I forget. I did click on this. I'll just go ahead and click on it again. I did click on it before. Declaration of supremacy. Well, that's exactly what it is, right? To blast out for all people everywhere to hear that the Muslims are coming to prayer. That's exactly the purpose of the public call to prayer. Well, I mean, it does also have the purpose of drawing Muslims in to come pray, but to blast it 5 times a day at the prescribed prayer hours when most people in the community don't want to hear it is absolutely a declaration of our supremacy over you. Got a highlighted comment from the weird stuff. He says they will use this kind of word manipulation to scare people that follow them, just and only to silence any debate. Typical propaganda. Yeah, I mean, it's all about rhetoric, right? I mean, forget RARE and these two organizations that actually organized the protests, because in fairness, we don't really know that much about them, right? But what about me? We know me. I suspect that you guys in the chat know me. I certainly know myself. Do I sound like an extremist who's always out there hating on people? Or do I go out of my way to try to be fair to the Muslims that we watch videos of, that we comment on? How many times have I said statements like, to be fair, and then opposed something that someone said in the chat that was anti-Islamic? So am I an extremist? Am I filled with hate? Well, I guess so. I guess so, because CAIR says so, based on the fact that I talked to Robert Spencer at one point, who is, a well-known international terrorist, who also just happens to be pretty much the nicest guy, probably even nicer than me. Like, I mean, David and AP made fun of me when I was on recently about how nice I was in comparison to them. And I'd say Robert's probably nicer than me, but somehow, he is the ultimate Islamophobe, basically just a terrorist, supports killing, slaughtering Muslims by the thousands or something along those lines. Yeah, okay, I'll answer this question from Freitag. You don't have to answer, which is fine, because I mean the split channel isn't about politics, right? It's not. One, it targets an international audience, and two, I'm not really all that interested in American politics. But the question level, nonetheless, would you be more active in politics if there wasn't a two-party system in your country? Some options through more parties and diplomacy. And to answer your question, yes, I think the two-party system is horrible because it turns the, not that it doesn't happen in other systems with broader representation, but it is especially vulnerable to turning the whole thing into just a us versus them game where people don't really even care about the political positions necessarily, that they are more interested in winning than anything else. And if there was, say, a proportional representation, a party gets 10% of the vote, they get 10% of the representatives, that would at least help with that kind of thing. I think that the standard European parliamentary system is superior to the two-party winner-takes-all system. Does that mean I think it's perfect, that it's without flaws? Of course not. But I really don't see any advantage to the American system. Trinity Matrix says, you're both nice and incredibly intelligent. Thank you very much for that. David makes fun of everyone. It's his thing. Oh, no, I wasn't offended. I was just selling that story. I consider David a friend, right? I consider an ally. I wasn't complaining. I was just saying, right? That's what they highlight. This is such a nice guy, right? This is such a nice guy. And by the way, in case you didn't understand the opening that says, "Why'd you go after this guy?" Hey man, do you want a flower? That's from them mocking me. I mean, not really mocking me, but mocking the ridiculousness of the idea of attacking someone so friendly as me, right? They say he's like an out of place hippie. He belongs in the 70s. Anyway, let's getting back to the main subject here. So we have this highly distorted, right, attack by CAIR. We have this nonsensical, it's just about representation for Muslims up here. Let me ask this question. If someone organized a Texas Christian Capital Day, how do you think that would go down, both in CAIR's book and in the media at large? Do you think that they would just be like, oh, that's cute, how nice? Or do you think they'd be like, extremists want to enforce Christianity on the entire country? I think we all know that it would be the second, right? That if someone had a explicitly Christian rally at the Capitol, and I don't know how the rules work in Texas exactly. I assume, though, that they had to petition and get permission, but also that, the government can't really deny them permission, that any organization that wanted to could get permission to stand on the Capitol stairs and speak. But so there wouldn't be a legal way to prevent a Texas Christian Capital Day. But I imagine that if there was such a thing, it would be portrayed as a bunch of hateful, bigoted people saying that they want representation for Christians in the government. I actually don't have a problem with Texas Muslim Capital Day. I think it's an incredibly stupid name. It should be more like Texas Muslims for Representation Day or something along those lines. Because Muslim capital sounds like they're trying to take over the Capitol, try to take over the government. Well, maybe that is actually what they are trying to do. Maybe it isn't really about just making sure that their voice is heard. I don't know. let's investigate. Let's investigate. So what I have found here, and I will pull it up in larger format in just a second here, but Texas House Resolution number 45. So this is an attempt to pass not a law exactly, but an official declaration by the state government recognizing Texas Muslim Capital Day. All right, let me switch my screen share to the large version of that. Give me 1 second. Because I can't blow it up since it's like embedded inside here. If I blow up the whole web page, it doesn't help any. So I downloaded it. It's a PDF, and I will now share that instead. So what we have here is that same resolution. And I'll wait a second to say that. All right, so here's the full text of the resolution. Whereas members of the Muslim community from throughout the state are gathering in Austin on April 29, 2025 to celebrate the 21st Texas Muslim Capital Day. So it would be the 21st anniversary of the first one, I believe, but the other website said it was, their own website says it's biannual, and near as I could tell, it is. The last one was in 2023, and the one before that 2021, so I think it's biannual. But the genius putting this resolution seems to think it's an annual event. Whereas Texas has made history in 22 with the election of the first 2 Muslim Americans to the Texas State House of Representatives, Suleiman Lalani and Salman Bojani. By the way, who's writing this resolution? It's Suleiman Lalani. So he feels the need to highlight himself as being historically important. And also, he's not exactly neutral here, right? He's a Muslim representative who's taking great pride in his Muslim heritage and makes that a big part of his identity as a Texas State House representative. Let's continue. Whereas the Muslim community is one of the fastest growing communities in Texas, with almost 500,000 representatives who identify as Muslim, constituting 1.7% of the state's population. (1.7%) according to him, of the state's population. They have 2 representatives in the Texas State House. There are 150 state house districts in Texas. So they have 1.3% of the representatives of the state. Doesn't seem like they are like vastly underrepresented to me. Doesn't seem like if they had 3 instead of 2, it would be, you know, 2.0%. Slightly closer to 1.7 than 1.3, but not really. Basically what you'd expect if they were properly represented is either 2 or 3 representatives. Muslims have 2 representatives in the state house. So what exactly are they rallying for here? How did Muslims get so many elected representatives? Well, you probably were thinking I was talking about nationally, right? That they had 2 representatives from Texas congressional districts nationally. But no, this is the local state house, right? This is the Texas State House. There's 150 districts. 2 of them are Muslims. I'm sure that they're both from very safe Democratic-leaning districts. They won the primary, and then no competition in the general election. Marion says I'm way too nice too, Abdul. See, this is actually the number one criticism I get from my audience, is that I'm too nice. And yet people like CAIR say that I'm a bigoted, hateful monster. Okay. Make up your mind, guys. Am I too nice or am I too mean? And weird stuff used to highlight to say, are you the extremist group? I guess I am. I am the extremist group. Yeah, by the way, is it every day Muslim Day in their countries? Do they have in say Iran, right, which has 1.7% give or take Christian population? Do they have uh, Christian capital, Iranian Christian capital day? No, they don't. Weird. Weird, weird, weird. All right, continuing on. Next thing that he puts in this. Whereas Muslims in America are one of the most racially diverse communities. What nonsense? What is that even supposed to mean? Muslims in America are not a community in any real sense, just as Christians in America are not a community in any real sense. A community is a group of people who usually live closely together, but at minimally interact closely together. Like, okay, so you guys are my community, right? You don't live closely together, but you all interact with each other. Muslims in California aren't interacting with Muslims in Texas on a daily basis. Furthermore, if we're talking about actual communities, Muslim communities tend to be very monolithic. That Muslims from, say, Somalia come to a place like Columbus, Ohio. Yes, we have a decent sized Muslim population here in Columbus, Ohio, where I live. And they're basically all from Somalia. And now this isn't a criticism of Muslims, right? It's just a acknowledgement that this claim is nonsensical because the communities are generally ethnically not diverse because all of the people from Somalia go to one place. All the people from Iran go somewhere else. People who immigrate from, say, Tunisia go somewhere else. And that's normal. That's actually normal behavior. It's not something specific to Islam. But to say that like Islam is like specially racially diverse or something is utter nonsense. If we're counting a community as having the same religious beliefs, or at least vaguely the same religious beliefs, because of course different Muslims from different countries believe different things, then, well, I'm sorry, but Christianity is the most diverse religious community in the United States because it has members from literally every ethnic group in the entire United States. So what is this supposed to mean? But like I said, in reality, all the Somalians go one place and the Iranians go somewhere else. And that's normal. That's why you have in big cities, you have Chinatown, right? Because the Chinese immigrants all tended to congregate in the same area. Here in Columbus, we have a portion of the city known as German Village and another portion known as Italian Village. Because historically, 150 years ago, when immigrants were coming from those countries, they all congregated in the same area. Doesn't mean that people of German ancestry don't live other places now, but the historical name was retained because that's just what migrants do, right? That they tend to congregate together. And I don't have a problem with that, but I do have a problem with them trying to claim that somehow Islam, Muslims in America are racially diverse. As some kind of special thing. America is a racially diverse country. It's well, to the extent that race exists, I actually think race is a stupid made-up concept. But ethnicity, a real thing, right? It's ethnically diverse. So what? That's not something special with your stupid community. But, they want to take credit for everything. Now, remember, this is supposed to be and it didn't go anywhere, but this is supposed to be a resolution that the Texas state government is officially acknowledging the things in this document, which at the end it's going to say, because of all these reasons, we acknowledge Texas State Muslim Day. Or, whatever. Texas Muslim State Capital Day. But notice what they're asserting, right? Notice what they're asserting. Whereas the Muslim community pioneered mathematical concepts such as algebra, the creation of zero, the modern-day decimal point system, calculus, and the concept of raising a number to a power. Moreover, the Muslim community developed numerous advancements in astronomy, geography, and medicine. In the 11th century, Muslim doctors invented hundreds of surgical tools. Let's pretend for a second that this paragraph isn't total bullshit. What would this have to do with Texas Muslims? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. This is an attempt by this congressman the state representative from Texas to put into Texas state declaration that Muslims are responsible for all these things. They are not responsible for any of these things in any real, important, meaningful way. Did Muslims at some point contribute to the intellectual development of humanity? Sure, they did. But so did every other group on the planet. It's not something unique to Islam, and they certainly don't get credit for all these things. I have a degree. My degree is in mathematics, right? I'm going to spend some time. I'm not going to go through the others, but the others is just as much bullshit. But I'm going to go through each one of these mathematical claims now, because this really, really shows what the actual intent of this nonsense is. And it's not at all about, let's just celebrate Muslims in the community and get better representation, blah, 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 blah. That is not what it's about at all, because it's about superiority, about Muslim superiority, of asserting that we are the better people. And sorry, I'm having some difficulty locating that. Give me 1 second to find it. All right, I found it. Let me share it. It's a little harder when I'm streaming by myself because I don't have any dead time to pull up what's coming up next. All right, let's start with algebra here. We're going to be looking at the Wikipedia articles on all these things. I'm not saying that Wikipedia can never have an error, but I'd say it's definitely a way more reliable source than, say, CAIR or the Muslim Congressman Suleiman Lalani, who couldn't even figure out how often his own stupid Texas Muslim capital day is held. Apparently it's biennial, and he thinks it's annual, right? So that's the extent of research that he does. He can't even get his own crap right, let alone the development of mathematics. So in this case, algebra, right? So this is the Wikipedia article on the history of algebra. Starts with Babylon in the year 1900 to 1600 BC. So what is algebra? Algebra is just the use of symbolic letters by convention now, but symbols in general, to represent unknown numbers. That's all algebra is. Okay, so the origins of algebra can be traced to ancient Babylonians who developed a positional number system that greatly aided them in solving rhetorical algebraic equations. The Babylonians were not interested in exact solutions, but rather approximations, so they would commonly use linear interpolation to approximate intermediate values. And then they show a tablet from the Babylonians on that. And, it goes on and on. I'm not going to go into great detail here. Then we got ancient Egypt in 1650 BC. Ancient Egyptian algebra dealt mainly with linear equations, while the Babylonians found these equations too elementary and developed mathematics to a higher level than the Egyptians. So algebra existed in ancient Egypt, okay? Greek mathematics. It's sometimes alleged that Greeks had no algebra, but that is disputed. By the time of Plato, Greek mathematics had undergone a drastic change. The Greeks created geometric algebra, where terms were represented by sides of geometric objects, usually lines that had letters associated with them. And with this new form of algebra, they were able to find solutions to equations by using a process they invented known as the application of areas. And then we got a manuscript here from circa 100 AD showing a figure where they're calculating the area, and it's not obvious, but there are letters representing unknown numbers. Then we got the bloom of Thyromedes in 400 BC to 350 BC. A particular individual, Thyromedes. Sorry, I don't know how it's pronounced. I'm sure that's wrong. Anyway, he invented a technique known as the bloom or flower, which is a way to calculate area of circles, because circles are way harder to calculate than, say, triangles or squares or any other shape with known sides. And look at this. He has equations with a bunch of unknowns. In other words, they're algebraic equations. Then we got Euclid, the great Greek mathematician, from 323 to 283 BC, and talks about how he, in his work on geometry, used algebra. It talks quite a lot about him. Then we got the Chinese on algebra, which is at least 300 BC, and talks about multiple different works of Chinese, philosophers, mathematicians, whatnot, who used algebra to calculate things. Wow, amazing. And then we got Diophantus, a Hellenistic mathematician in 250 AD, and his use of algebra, right? And the idea here is that these are all people who are advancing knowledge, coming up with new ideas, using things that would later be adapted and come into modern understanding of mathematics. Then we got Indian mathematicians. The Indian mathematicians were active in studying about number systems. The earliest known Indian mathematical documents are dated to around the middle of the first millennia BC, 6th century BC. And then what do we get? We get specific Indian mathematicians who used algebra to calculate various different things. And then finally, well, not finally, it does continue on past this, but I'll stop here. We get that the Islamic world, the first century of the Islamic Arab Empire, saw almost no scientific or mathematical achievements, since the Arabs, with their newly conquered empire, had not yet gained any intellectual drive, and research in other parts of the world had faded. So in other words, in early Islam,
Who ate the apple?
to the teachings of Muhammad in the Quran, they did not have any interest in doing mathematics or science. That changed after the empire got large, and in the second half of the 8th century, Islam had a cultural awakening, and research in mathematics and science increased. And then it talks about some specific things that were done. What was their primary contribution to the field of algebra, other than supplying the word algebra? It was translating the works of the Greek mathematicians who had already discovered this stuff. Okay. Yeah, so they separated it from just general mathematics or geometry into a separate discipline and gave it the name algebra. But where did they get the ideas from? The Greek works that they translated. Yeah, they made some really, they definitely invented algebra, right? They definitely invented algebra like the individual told us that they did. That is, what do you think about the origin of the name of algebra coming from Arabic? Yeah, I mean, you obviously asked this before, but I mean, it's right here on your screen. It comes from an Arabic word. So what? Why does it come from an Arabic word? Well, coincidence of history. Word origins don't usually have a lot of meaning. But as said here, they also separated it. Right? People were doing algebra to calculate, say, the area of a square, or the unknown side of a triangle, or whatever else. But they were doing it as part of geometry, not as an independent discipline. So because they made it an independent discipline and combined with the coincidences of history, the word algebra comes from Arabic. But notice none of these other words are going to come from Arabic. May I remind us to like the video? Please do that. All right, let's go on to the invention of zero, as they said. Creation of zero. Creation of zero is what Suleiman says, that they created zero. Well, first of all, you can't create zero. At most, you could discover the mathematical concept of zero. But of course, this concept, I'm sure you'll be shocked to know, has existed since the ancient times. History. of the number 0. Ancient Egyptian numerals were base 10. They used hieroglyphs for the digits that were not positional. In one papyrus written around 1770 BC, a scribe recorded daily income and expenses for the pharaoh's court using the NFR hieroglyph to indicate cases where the amount of foodstuff received was exactly equal to the amount distributed. In other words, that there was 0, right? That it was being used to say that 0 food was owed and 0 money was owed to pay for the food. By the middle of the second millennia BC, Babylonian mathematicians had a sophisticated base 6 positional numeral system. The lack of positional value or 0 was indicated by a space. So they didn't use a symbol to represent it, but they knew about the concept of 0 and they put a space to represent it. A space is essentially a symbol, right? You choose to write words a certain way. A space has a meaning in English, right? It has a meaning. It's separating two words. In Babylonian mathematics, a space has a meaning. It means 0. Wow. But I thought that the Muslims invented this. Pre-Columbian Americas also had a conception of 0. In fact, they had a numerical symbol for the 0. Okay. And that was as early as the 4th century BC. Classical antiquity. Ancient Greeks had no symbol for 0. There you go. See, there you go. Because they didn't have a symbol for 0, they must have had no idea what a 0 was. However, if you go on, you'll read that they did sometimes actually use a lowercase Greek letter, the omicron, for 0. Hey, that kind of looks like a 0, doesn't it? No. Geez. The reason they didn't write zeros, though, wasn't because they didn't understand them. It was because they had some sort of philosophical opposition to using 0 as a number. They didn't like the concept that nothing was a number. They used 0 in their mathematics when they needed it. They just didn't like the concept that 0 was a number. Okay. Then we got 150 by 150 AD. However, this had changed, and the work of Ptolemy and whatnot, they were using digits for 0. Digit values continuously from 0 to 12. So they added, by the time of Ptolemy, they had a digit value for 0. China also had representation for 0, but they also used an empty space. That's a valid way to represent 0. It doesn't mean you don't know what 0 is. It's just a valid way to represent 0. India. The concept of 0 as a written digit in the decimal place value notation was developed in India. I thought that it was developed by the Arabs. Nope, it was developed in India. The idea of giving it a specific symbol. Obviously, it was independently developed in the Americas. They had no contact with the old world. So they also developed the concept. But the first credit that leads to modern Western Europe mathematics is from India. That's still in India. Then we got Middle Ages transmission to Islamic culture. Wait, I thought they invented it. No. Once again, their contribution was to take the knowledge of the lands they conquered and spread those knowledge. That is generally that's what you're going to see every single time you see a claim about, Islam spreading science or Islam spreading knowledge or Islam spreading mathematics. It's that they united the knowledge of the conquered lands of India with the knowledge of the conquered lands of North Africa, with the knowledge of the conquered portions of Europe that they took. And because they had access to a diversity of knowledge, because of the size of their empire, they occasionally took things that different people had not linked together and linked them together. And that's the extent of their contribution to human history. Weird stuff's been busy here. Alexander the Great created the Roman Catholic Church in Rome 300 years before Christ. True story. Indeed it is. As long as you look at their website, right? Because it's on their own website.
It's on their website. Don't go like this. It's on their website.
course, we'd have no idea where because it's not on the website. He also triggered who ate the apple twice, and then said people before the applied number system used their own letters to make computations. It was alphanumeric system. That is why they used different types of computations. Yeah. I mean, the basic ideas of all modern mathematics have existed since ancient times because mathematics isn't really an invention. It's a discovery, right? The symbols and whatnot that you use to represent things are invented, right? You invent what the digit number 1 looks like, but you don't invent what the concept of 1 is, right? It's something that exists in physical reality, which is just being described through mathematics. Anyway, so we have the amazing contributions by mathematicians who happened to be Muslims starting in 813 AD. And what is their responsibility? They transmitted the systems from the Hindu Arabic numeral system, i.e. the system that was invented in India, copied by the Muslims. They transmitted that to Western Europe when they conquered Spain and Turkey and whatnot. And then that happened to be the system we adopted. You know, if you look at the Islamic numbers, the Arabic numbers, some of them resemble our modern numbers because we adopted their system of numbering. So what? That doesn't mean they invented numbers. Exactly, creating 0, they said. It's like saying, I found out there's nothing before 1. Duh. All right, that's enough on that one. The next claim is that they invented the decimal system. Let's look at the Wikipedia article on the decimal system. History. Many ancient cultures calculated numerals based on 10, perhaps because of 2 human hands with 10 figures. Standardized weights in the Indus Valley Civilization, 3300 to 1300 BC, were based on ratios of 1/20th, 1/10th, 1/5, 1/2, 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, 50, 200, 500. But the ruler, as in, a yardstick or a 12-inch long ruler or a meter stick.
Who ate the apple?
That was divided into 10 equal parts. Egyptian hieroglyphs in evidence since 3000 BC were purely decimal system. Used a purely decimal system. Egyptian hieroglyphs used a purely decimal system. Over here from Suleiman, they invented the modern day decimal point system. Well, he did say modern day, so let's see if that's true. However, they didn't invent the decimal system that existed in Egyptian hieroglyphs. Continuing on, the Minoans had a decimal system. The Mycenaeans had a decimal system. Unitized culture in Central Europe
Who
had
ate
a
the apple?
standardized decimal system. Classical Greece had a decimal system, and so on and so forth. Then we got, well, maybe they're just talking about the fractional part, the part after the decimal point. What about that? History of decimal fractions. Starting in the 2nd century BC, some Chinese units for length were based on divisions into 10. By the 3rd century CE, these metrological units were used to express decimal fractions of lengths non-positionally. So they invented basically the concept of using fractions, because that's what 0.1 is, right? It's 1/10. Right? If you're not using a base 10 system, a fraction, 0.1 would be some other number, 1/7 if you're using a decimal system of 7, for example. But regardless, they had conceptions of fractional units, i.e. the digits after the decimal point. By the 5th century CE, you can calculate a 7-digit approximation of pi. And I actually read a book a long time ago, because I'm a complete nerd, on the history of calculating pi. And from ancient times, people were calculating pi. All that improved was their accuracy in doing so. They still had a concept of a number that is less than 1, but more than 0 through all that time, because obviously the 0.14 part of pi fits into that category. And then they even show you how in Chinese counting rods, how the number 0.96644 is denoted. All right. That's a pretty complex fraction there, or, decimal number there. And yet they have the ability to express that. Now, what was Islam's contribution for that? Al-Khawarizmi introduced fractions to Islamic countries in the early 9th century CE, written with a numerator above and denominator below without a horizontal bar. This form of fraction remained in use for centuries. So what did they do exactly? They took the knowledge from China and spread it to Europe. Okay. And the positional decimal fractions appear for the first time in a book by the Arab mathematician Abu al-Hasan al-Aqidlisi, written in the 10th century. And then we got a Jewish mathematician around 1350, also using them, but didn't develop a system for notation. Where did the modern notation system come from? Simon Stevin in the 16th century is the first to use something representing the modern system. So they didn't create the idea of a decimal system. They didn't create the idea of digits after less than 1, after the decimal point in our modern system. They didn't invent the way of notating them. None of the things that statement could possibly mean are actual inventions by a Muslim, or discoveries by a Muslim, or contributions by a Muslim. We have Jack Gray donating 5 Reasoned Answers memberships.
Sir, how can we contribute financially for your organization? They get in touch with me. And very easy, people know where I am. And once they get in touch with me to contribute without causing problem, to contribute in big amounts. And many people call me for lunch and for dinner and for meal, and for every meal they give big amounts, alhamdulillah. So those who really want to contribute, they come and meet me.
For every meal Zakir Naik has, people are donating big amounts of money to his totally legitimate charities that totally did not get seized by the Indian government, and he had to flee his home country because he would have wanted for massive fraud, converting millions and millions of dollars of donations into houses for his relatives. That totally didn't happen. Anyway, thank you very much for those 5 gifted Reason Answers memberships, Jack Ray. Then he also used Who Ate the Apple to say most Islamic innovation is innovating in the religious ideas, bid'ah. That is 100% true. The only actual innovation in Islam is changing the religious teachings of Muhammad, which is a horrific thing, according to Islam, called bid'ah. And finally, from Weird Stuff, before Islam, there was no advanced civilizations, only Islam. Alhamdulillah, ha 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 ha, that's so hilarious. They invented history. That's what they want to claim. That's what they want to claim. Because the reason they do this is part of their massive inferiority complex. Because the Quran tells them that they're supposed to be the best of all creatures, that Allah is supposed to specially provide for them. Yet they look at the modern world and they see approximately 0 meaningful contributions by anyone who's a Muslim. Almost 0 Nobel Prizes, for example, won by Muslims, despite representing 1.8 billion people in the world. And that no important inventions, right? Nothing from modern technology that we use on a daily basis comes from a Muslim inventor. And so they say, this looks really bad. This looks really, really bad. We're supposed to be the best of all creatures, and we're not contributing anything to the world economy or the world system other than pulling some oil out of the ground. Oh, but in the past we did. And all modern science is basically just reusing the developments of the golden age of Islam anyway, which is, of course, complete and total nonsense. I'm falling asleep now, bro. Great. Good. I guess. The only contribution of Islam is inventing algebra for Aisha's age. True, Jesse. True. All right, let's get through these last two. The last two are just so insanely stupid that we don't have to spend a lot of time with them. He claimed that they invented calculus. Now, anyone who knows anything about mathematics, calculus is probably the thing they are most likely to know the history of, or at least know the quote-unquote inventor or discoverer of calculus, which is universally recognized as the great Muslim Isaac Newton. And yeah, I got you, Jesse. I got you. Alongside independently discovered by Leibniz. So I guess they're Muslims. But let's just look at the Wikipedia article really quick. So precursors to calculus. Oh, sorry, that's modern precursors. I got to go up to the ancient precursors. Early precursors of calculus. I won't go through all the details this time because this is just so ridiculous. It's outrageous. Egypt and Babylon again. Greece again. China again. And then, once again, you get the Islamic contribution or the Middle Eastern contribution. Let's see, what did he do? What did Hassan do here? He Latinized. Oh, sorry, that's his name, Latinized. He derived a formula for the sum of fourth powers. He determined that the equations to calculate the area enclosed by a curve represented by y equals xk, and then they put in modern calculus notation, for any non-integer value of k. So he solved one specific mathematical equation that is extremely basic calculus. Congratulations. Which he was able to integrate squares and fourth powers. Yeah, well, you know, the integral of squares and fourth powers is a simple formula nowadays. So he did some mathematics. Congratulations. Does that mean he invented calculus? No, of course not. And then we got contributions from India, as per usual. Then modern precursors in Europe before the time of Newton and Leibniz. But who actually invented calculus? Well, to the extent that anything in mathematics is invented, it was not a Muslim, but it was these two independently, but, you know, building on the work of others, right? Building on the work of those who had come before them. So who gets the credit? Apparently just Muslims, right? Apparently just Muslims. And then finally, they said that they invented let's see what the exact words were. The concept of raising a number to a power. So this genius just doesn't even know what it's called, but that's called exponentiation. So then you got the where the term comes from. It has nothing to do with Muslims. And then you got the first known occurrence of it, according to the Wikipedia article. Now, this Wikipedia article doesn't have very much information, so I do have two other sources for this one. But Archimedes. I'm pretty sure Archimedes wasn't a Muslim. Just saying. But then, you know, you got a contribution from a Persian mathematician, so a Muslim mathematician. What was his contribution? I think this is a direct quote from him. Like most mathematicians and those of earlier times, I guess this is a quote from someone else describing his work. Anyway, thought of a squared number as a depiction of an area, especially of land-hence property. And cube. So what did he develop? He developed terms for squares and for cubes. Did people know how to calculate squares and cubes before him? Of course they did. He came up with terms for square and cube. Now let's look at a little bit more at the history here. So from two mathematical websites. History of exponents dates back many centuries, and Euclid is credited with the first notion of exponents. Over here they said Archimedes. Wikipedia, they said Euclid here, whatever. It doesn't really matter. People know how to do squares since the very invention of mathematics or discovery of mathematics. I'm pretty sure people knew how to square numbers. He used the term power, which is, by the way, what we use today, to represent what we know today, how many times a number is multiplied by itself. The ancient Greek mathematicians used powers, and many other mathematicians added to the use of exponents as they learned more about their use. Archimedes generalized the same idea of powers, and later mathematicians in Islamic Golden Age utilized powers of 2 and 3 in their work in algebra. Saying the same thing, right? I mean, it added Euclid here, but Euclid is the first known to have used the term power, used a notation for exponents. Archimedes generalized the principle. And then what did the Islamic Golden Age contribute? Powers of 2 and 3 in their work of algebra, but powers of 2 and 3 already existed, so that's just there for the heck of it, right? And then they talk about many other contributions from the 14th century forward to the modern mathematical theory. Then from a second website here, they actually disagree. They have completely different information. They talk about the modern usage, or where the term came from, which was, of course, from the modern system came from a European. Shockingly enough, the modern European mathematics came from a European. But they talk about how this was done in ancient times, much more ancient than the Greeks, in fact, because, well, it's not 100% certain. It appears the idea of squaring or cubing goes all the way back to the Babylonian times. Babylon is part of Mesopotamian area we can now consider Iraq. The earliest known mention of Babylon is found in a tablet from the 23rd century BC. Didn't really need to know that. Anyway, and they were screwing around with the concept of exponents even then, although their numbering system uses symbols to denote mathematical formulations. Oddly, they didn't know what to do with the number 0, so they eliminated by a space between symbols. Now, I think that that's really stupid. The choosing to represent 0, nothing, as a space doesn't mean you don't know what to do with it. It just means you choose to have space as your symbol for 0. Anyway, they show us an equation from an ancient Babylonian tablet, which is very confusing. I'll explain it. So first digit of the number 2, second digit of the number 27 squared is first digit 6, second digit 0, third digit 9. Now, the reason this looks really weird, you're going to say, like, I don't know how to get 609 from 227, is because they used a base 60 system. So this 2 represents 120. So like 1 0 would be 60. So 2 represents 120. 27 represents 27 because it's the last digit in it. So that's 147. 2 comma 27 is what we would call 147 because we use a base 10 system. They used a base 60 system. Likewise, 6 would be 6 times 60 times 60. 0 times 60 would be the middle digit, and then 9 is the last digit, which, as they explain here, represents the number 147 squared, which is 21,609, which is correct. And so in the base 60 system, they squared the number 147 in ancient Babylon. And yet this is somehow an invention of... So Law said, why is the decimal system looking like that? Seems overly complicated. So I guess you're going back to some picture from here. This probably is what you're probably talking about. So he's saying that the 0... So you have the 0 circled here to represent the decimal point, and then the 1 circled to represent that this is fractional 1/5, that this is fractional 10 squared, so 4/100, fractional 10 cubed, so 2 to the 2 over 1,000, and so forth. The reason it's being represented that way is because the notation hadn't been invented yet, but then John Napier introduced the use of the period, and thus basically gave us the modern way where you don't have all this extra stuff. So the reason they were represented this way is because they were still thinking of things after the decimal points as what they actually are, which is fractions, which is what all the previous things had done too, right? The Chinese system had done it that way. The Arabic system had done it that way. Everyone had done it that way, because that's actually, even though you don't think of it that way anymore, that is actually what a decimal is a fraction of a whole number. So he had those numbers to indicate what portion of the fraction it was representing. And then the 0 on the end here is to indicate that there is no further digits. That's why there's a 0 on the end. Whereas we wouldn't need to have that 0 necessarily. Anyway, just finishing this up. So the ancient Babylons were able to square the number 147. It seems that they knew about squares and cubes back then. I have not done a video on the mathematical error in the inheritance calculation. But so basically, the Quran describes inheritance, and it works in some cases, but the author of it didn't consider all possible cases. So in other cases, it just doesn't work. And how they actually calculate inheritance is basically they assume that it's supposed to add up to 1, and then they correct it. Allah says, you've given me PTSD flashbacks from high school. I understood nothing, and I'm very depressed. Well, I'm sorry. Let me summarize it in non-mathematical terms. The contributions of Islam to modern mathematics are extremely insignificant, mostly consist of taking the knowledge from India and combining it with the knowledge of North Africa / Europe, who had the same knowledge at the time. So that's mostly what their contributions to mathematics consist of. But again, we have, and I'm going to re-share it now. We have this declaration, which the Muslim congressman hopes will be put into the official record of the state of Texas, that Muslims are responsible. The Muslim community pioneered mathematical concepts. And then he also says some other things, which I'm not going to go into details, but trust me, they're the same basic idea, that all the ideas existed before Islam. Islam's contributions, to the extent that there were any, consisted of combining the knowledge from the East with the knowledge of the West. Let's go on to his next proposition here. Whereas the unwavering dedication of the leaders from the Islamic community in the state of Texas has served as an impetus for a more equal and altruistic population, Muslims have held public office in Texas from the local level, such as city council members and judges, all the way up to state representatives. What is his basis for saying that the Islamic community of Texas has served as an impetus for a more equal and altruistic population? What exactly? He just wants to take all this, he wants to take credit for wokeism, I think, is what he wants.
Who ate the apple?
Based on what? Based on what exactly? Well, I guess they have advocated for Muslims who are a protected group, who are part of a minority. Therefore, it's for more equal because Muslims don't have enough power and they deserve more, I think. I don't know. Whereas by bringing their perspectives to the legislative forum, members of the Muslim community are contributing to the dialogue and policy issues and helping to work towards a brighter future for all residents of the Lone Star State. So that one's like the only one that has anything to do whatsoever with the purpose of this Muslim day. So then he says, resolved. So this is what all that other crap, all these whereas, are the reasons for the actual resolution. This is the actual resolution. That the state of representatives of the 89th Texas legislature hereby recognize April 29, 2025 as Texas Muslim Capital Day and extend to all those participating sincere best wishes for the enjoyment and memorable visit to Austin. So that's what he actually wants the Congress of Texas to do, is to say, good luck on your Texas Muslim Day. Texas Muslim Capital Day. Obviously, this is totally pointless, right? This is totally pointless. What was the real purpose of this? to put into the state record how awesome the Muslims are, how much Muslims have contributed to society and whatnot. Now, this didn't go anywhere. He entered it into the legislation agenda. It got referred to committee, and it never went anywhere. So this isn't actually part of the state record, but he wanted it to be part of the state record because this is the actual purpose of Texas State Capital Day. Texas Muslim State Capital Day is to assert how important Muslims are. How Muslims are the one, you owe everything you like to Muslims. Yeah. Cargo Crew says, I wouldn't say Islam contribution is zero, it's negative, and that is a very higher degree negative. So let me clarify. Islam, or more properly, the political empire that was founded by people attempting to spread Islam by the sword, made some small contributions to the history of human knowledge. However, they also greatly inhibited human knowledge in other ways, where according to their own books, which might be an exaggeration, but according to their own books, they took the entire library of Alexandria, famous ancient library of Egypt, supposedly the greatest library to ever exist, and burned all the books. And they were burning fires for weeks and weeks and weeks from burning all those books. Why? Because the leader at the time was asked, and this is all according to Muslim sources, not according to critics, he was asked, what should we do with all these books? And he says, well, there's two possibilities. The knowledge contained in there is compatible with the Quran, in which case we have no use for it, because we already have the Quran, or it's against the knowledge of the Quran, in which case it's heretical and should be burned. So just burn it. Either way, either we lose nothing or we gain by burning all this. Patricia says, this is hilarious. So wait, this is hilarious. Dude tries to contribute, highlighting number two's contributions that are mostly lies or at least exaggerated claims, but gets discarded. So he ends up contributing nothing. Yes. Now, in fairness, the vast majority of bills and resolutions and pointless crap that Congress people try to put into law doesn't ever get taken up and certainly doesn't get passed. Only a tiny minority of the things that are proposed get passed. But yes, he ends up contributing nothing. But I highlight this because it shows you what the actual purpose of this stupid day is to assert Muslim superiority and say, why aren't you listening to us? Why aren't you listening to us? All right, so we got all of that, and now we'll come to the actual rally, which, let me pull that up here. So this is a minute-long video that Valentina published on Twitter. Hold on. I think I need to reshare because I don't think I shared sound the first time. All right. That she put on Twitter. It's actually more like 20 seconds long from a couple different perspectives. But I'll just play through the whole thing and then we'll go back and we'll talk about it.
Islam is the religion of rape, incest, and pedophilia, where they bow down to a stupid rock and a false prophet. I will never let you feel lost for this. The Christian nation. This is 11 months.
Go back in your cage,
Go
dog.
back to your Muslim nation.
Go march somewhere else. Hey, go march somewhere else.
Try something, bro. Ven, por acá a la izquierda. We're rolling.
And that is the end of the video. So the first point I want to point out, right, is the size of the crowd. Here's a pretty good perspective on it. That don't look like a very large crowd to me, right? This is supposed to be a massive rally showing the political power of Muslims in Texas. You got, I don't know, 2-3 dozen people there. And probably a lot of them aren't even Muslims. They're probably just other people who turned up to be supportive. So that's the first thing I want to note, that this crowd is not very large. And as I showed at the beginning, it got exactly 0 news coverage. The rally got exactly 0 news coverage. All right, so here we'll go back to the start now. They're on the steps of the Capitol building. Right? They're on the steps of the Capitol building. I assume they have a permit. They're allowed to be there. Some other speaker probably just finished up, and then this new speaker starts walking up. She's wearing a head covering. Wait, she rips it off. She rips off the head covering. What's going on here?
Islam is the religion of rape.
Islam is the religion of rape. Very provocatively put, but is it really wrong? Because there is nothing in Islam to protect a woman's rights, right? If she wants to accuse someone of rape, she has to have 4 male witnesses that have seen the pen going into the inkwell, as the Muslim commentators put it. They've seen the penis entering into the vagina. They haven't just seen a man on top of her. They've literally seen his member going into her body. That's what she has to have if she wants to accuse a man of rape. That sure sounds like there's no protection against rape in Islam to me. Provocatively put, but seems to be right. Seems to be correct. I really can't say all that much against it. Let's see what else she says.
Incest and pedophilia.
Incest and pedophilia. Well, I guess that depends on how you define incest. If you mean like mother-son, father-daughter relationship, no, Islam forbids that. But if you mean first cousins, then yes, that is allowed in Islam. As far as pedophilia goes, I mean, I don't have to explain this one. You guys all know that Muhammad, the perfect example for all men to follow, married a 6-year-old girl and raped her when she turned 9. That sure sounds like pedophilia to me. And he's the perfect example to follow. Now, 98% of Muslim men are not interested in 9-year-old girls. However, they are allowed to have them based on the example of their prophet, which means that the 1 or 2% that are sick, mentally ill individuals who are attracted to minors have every ability to practice that in Islam. So is Islam the religion of incest and pedophilia? I guess it depends on how you define terms, but by standard American definitions, yeah, I would say it is.
They bow down to a stupid rock and
They bow down to a stupid rock and a false prophet. That's true. That is literally a requirement to be a Muslim, is to bow down and face a rock. For some reason, that's not worshiping a rock. But if you bow down to pray to Allah and you're not facing the black rock, you are not doing it right and Allah won't listen to you. You have to face the rock. You have to bow down to the rock in order for your prayers to be heard in Islam. Seems to be true to me. As far as false prophet goes, duh. Muhammad's the most obviously false prophet in history. This is literally a guy who came and gave as a primary argument to believe him that he was confirming the truth of the gospel and the Torah that came before him, while totally contradicting everything they said, and including all kinds of things that he heard that he thought were part of them that are actually parts of non-canonical sources, not the Torah and the gospel. What was his other great arguments for believing in Islam? That he was creating really cool poetry, even though by the standards of the day, it was really bad poetry. And his opponent said as much. They said, I can make much better poetry than that. This is garbage. This is terrible. You're not even doing it right. To which Muhammad went on long rants and then put those in the middle of his poetry. Oh, I'm sorry, the words of Allah. The words of Allah. So, is anything said wrong here? I don't think so. I think this is an accurate description of what Islam teaches.
False prophet. I will never let Sharia law take over.
I will never let Sharia law take over Texas, to which all the crowd is booing. I guess they want Sharia law in Texas. But Sharia law is illegal in the United States. It's impossible to implement in the United States without vastly changing the laws of the country, changing the United States Constitution, for example. So being against Sharia law is something every American should be for. Let's continue. So she said, this is a Christian nation. There's 57 Muslim nations. Here I'm going to disagree with her. Not with there being 57 Muslim nations. It could be 57, 58, depending on how you count, that are majority Muslim. If she just means that the United States is majority Christian, sure. However, the United States is not a Christian nation in the sense that those Islamic countries are, with a couple exceptions, Islamic countries where they have the Islamic texts as the foundation of their law. The United States is a secular country. It has foundations of biblical principles behind its laws, but it doesn't promote Christianity the way Islamic nations promote Islam. Now, you can disagree with that. You can say that shouldn't be the case. You could say that nations should be based on Christian teachings and the Bible, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree, but that's not the point. The point is, America is not really a Christian nation in the sense that Christianity determines the laws of the country the way that Islam determines the laws of almost all Muslim nations. And then you can't hear what she says there, and then they start taking her away. And then this one guy here in this blue jacket really is upset. He starts saying, go away, go away. And then he'll make some very interesting comments at the end from a different camera, or at least a different camera angle. And then someone says takbir, and the 30 people or whatever there start chanting Allahu Akbar, whatever. I don't care. They can chant that if they want. We got a different angle which shows the size of the crowd. And then we got a little bit later walking down the steps here.
Go back in your cage.
So same guy, I think. I'm not 100% certain, but I think it's the same guy. No, actually, it's not the same guy, because that guy had gray hair, didn't he? Anyway, so not the same guy as the guy saying go away. We got this guy here, this Muslim, I presume. All right, he's got a big beard and he hates her, so I think he's probably Muslim. What is he saying? All right, what is he saying?
Hey, go back in your cage,
Go
dog.
back to your Muslim.
Go back in your cage, dog. Now, why would a tolerant Muslim, right? The resolution that we read, or the proposed resolution we read there, said that Muslims and Islam have been responsible for increasing tolerance and diversity in the country. So why would a Muslim who's all for increasing tolerance and understanding among the people tell someone to go back to their cage, dog? That kind of sounds like a pretty severe insult, to call a woman a dog and tell her to get in a cage. Almost sounds like he thinks that he is a caliphate and she's his dhimmi, and he could just order her to be humiliated. Kind of seems like he's not very tolerant to me. Right? Okay, so there's like, go away, whatever. We don't want to hear you, whatever. Go back to your cage, dog? Is that a tolerant way? If a Muslim came in here, a Muslim came in and they were discussing with me live, and they said, Christianity is the religion where priests rape children. And my response was to throw him off the stage and then say, go back to your cage, dog. How would people react to that? Do you think that they'd be like, oh, he's just a really tolerant, loving guy? I'm just asking questions, right? I'm just asking questions here. Doesn't seem to be too tolerant to me. Cargo says it's possible that his mom was in a cage and his mom was his dad's cousin. I mean, anything's possible. We're just asking questions. We're just putting out possibilities here, right?
Hey, go march somewhere
Try
else.
something, bro. Ven, por acá a la izquierda, a la izquierda.
And in case you didn't catch it there, he then barks at her. Arf, arf, arf. And then nothing else really happens here. Police take her away. Now, she did actually disturb the peace, right? She did actually go up on stage where she wasn't invited, take the microphone. She kind of tricked them into thinking she was the next speaker with the head covering, which, by the way, is pretty based there. That she goes up to the head covering, rips it off. So she did actually do something wrong. I mean, I don't think she'll be charged with anything. It would be a very minor misdemeanor, even if she was. She wasn't allowed to be there, and she put herself onto the scene. So they have that, which is why the police then at the end are like, let's go. But she wasn't wrong about anything in Islam, as near as I can tell. She was slightly wrong, or a difference of opinion, at least what it means to be a Christian nation there. And I forgot to pull this article up for some reason, but I wanted to take a look at an article about her. So give me 1 second to refind that from before today. There we go. I forgot to pull this one up, so thank you for your patience. Oh, and they're not going to let me view the article. They let me view it earlier, but now they're saying you have to log in or subscribe to keep reading. Fine, I will sign up for your stupid free trial because I'm not going to subscribe to the Texan. So give me 1 second to subscribe to that, or get my free trial. Obviously, I'm doing this off screen, so you're not seeing me enter my information. I'm not a robot. It's my fault for not prepping it in advance. Thank you for your patience. All right, I can now read the article for you guys. And discuss a little bit more about who she is. All right, so we got this article here from the Texan, the Michael Jordan of politics. Valentina Gomez brings brazen brand from Missouri to Texas. That's her self-description, by the way. She's definitely not actually the Michael Jordan of politics. She doesn't actually win all the time or something along those lines. Social media sensation Valentina Gomez has taken the online world by storm, amassing millions of views in audacious, attention-grabbing videos chock full of various slurs and threats against pedophiles and other sexual offenders. Honestly, I don't think you can really slur a pedophile. Just my opinion. I don't really think you can slur a pedophile, but that's what this article says. First is candidate for Missouri Secretary of State, now for sites set on Texas' 31st Congressional District. So she ran for Missouri Secretary of State a couple years ago. She finished 5th or 6th, I think it says in here, but 5th or 6th in the Republican primary with like 7% of the vote. However, she has drawn quite a lot of attention. Gomez is best known for unfiltered, brash tone and short videos posted online, not one to shy away from telling U.S. House Speaker Michael Johnson, who is a Republican, that he lacks the balls to serve the American people, or to describe her dissenters as being infected with Valentina derangement syndrome, a phrase similar to the one used to describe critics of President Donald Trump. Now, I don't think anyone has Valentina derangement syndrome. I don't think anyone cares that much about her. Just saying. Valentina, who earned a bachelor's degree from blah, blah, blah. She entered politics because I saw corruption and weakness in the system. I couldn't sit by. She emigrated from Colombia at age 10, which is going to be ironic that she's an immigrant to the United States. And her military family moved around in search of the American dream. She ended up getting to swimming for scholarship purposes. Athletic scholarships paid her way, which is one of the reasons why she will never allow men in women's sports. Then more on her swimming background there. In regards to her own background as an immigrant, she said, we came here legally, filed our paperwork, and followed the procedures to become U.S. citizens. These politicians in Texas have given illegals a better treatment than our own soldiers stationed here. If you want to come to America, do it legally, file your paperwork. Don't just hop the border. Now, I want to point out that the people that have been in the news and being arrested by the Trump administration for statements supportive of Palestine, mostly, are in fact all here legally. That isn't actually the issue, right? The issue isn't that they are supposedly here illegally. The issue cited by the administration is that they are making anti-American statements and they're not supportive of the country and they have the right to pull their visa at any time. And legally speaking, I think that's true, that they have the right to pull anyone's legal status at any time and deport them. However, it's important to understand they're not here illegally, right? And when Valentina and her family came here 20 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever it was, actually I think it's more like 15 years ago. I think she's in her early 20s. They were here on the same kind of visa that the people who are being deported from the United States and making headlines are. Are people who are illegal being deported too? Sure, but they're not the ones who are making headlines. I'm coming dangerously close to making political statements here. I understand that. I'm just trying to put all the facts out there so you can make your own decisions. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm trying to put all the facts out there. That her status, her family status here, is actually very similar to the people who Trump, at least the ones who are making headlines, are being deported. She continued to extend her route to politics. It's been a battle ever since, calling out the establishment and standing for truth. As a consequence, I have been deplatformed. My dogs have been poisoned. My father was almost killed. My brother Jonathan was illegally fired. And I was standing stronger than ever. God gives the hardest battles to the strongest soldiers. I don't think that her brother's going to be discussed in this article. But her brother Jonathan was aide to a Democratic mayor in some city, and he was fired when she became a politician in Missouri running for office. Technically, that's not illegal. You can be fired for political views, especially if you're serving under a politician. I would say it's definitely wrong. I would say it's definitely discriminatory in an actual sense, but legally speaking, it is actually legal to fire someone for their political views. Later on, I'll get into her own firing, and I'll definitely have some comments on that as well. As far as like, if someone poisoned her dogs or tried to kill her father, if that's true, that is 100% absolutely horrific. However, I always have doubts about when people say this kind of thing. Whether they're Republicans, Democrats, Muslims, Christians, whatever, I find that there's a lot of tendency to exaggerate the level of hatred that you get, right? I mean, I could stand up here every day and say, oh, I'm under immense death threats, blah, 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 blah. Well, what would that actually mean, right? Occasionally a Muslim sends me a threat saying that someone's going to get you. Sometimes they even say, I'm coming for you. It's not remotely credible, though. I don't feel like I'm actually under anything that could really be a death threat. And so I'm always very very suspect of things like that, because it seems that every single time anyone's in the news for any kind of controversy whatsoever on any side of any issue, one of the first things they say is, I'm under death threats now. I'm under death threats. People keep calling me and threatening me. I really don't believe it. I'm sorry. But if that did actually happen, obviously that's horrific, and whoever did those things should be severely punished. Gomez first garnered national attention online after she began posting the aforementioned videos, demonstrating with a torch, blower, and pile of literature that what she'd do as Secretary of State in Missouri with children's books containing sexually explicit LGBT-related content, burning them in front of a camera while accompanied by rap music and bright captions. So this is one of the 2 videos that she did while she was running for Secretary of State that garnered a lot of attention. If there are actually if there was actually sexually explicit material in the children's in schools, 100% that should be taken out of a school library, an elementary school library. However, I question whether that's actually true. And I also question her motive, because she only pulled LGBT books. Well, there's plenty of heterosexual explicit books too. So why are you targeting these specific books and calling them sexually explicit? Is it because there was a character in a children's book that had a spouse who was of the same gender and didn't have anything to do with the story? Because I'm sorry, that isn't sexually explicit material. Now, I'm against all these books. I don't think that anyone should read such propaganda and such trash, but I also highly question whether she was accurately representing what was in those books. I also, I'm not against, right? So I don't mind this one. I don't mind the display here of, grandiose, over-the-top burning of these books. I do somewhat question her genuineness, though. I think she did it to get attention, not because she actually had a real issue that was actually happening in the schools. That's my thoughts on it. I've been known to, rip up a Quran or 2 or 20. And so I'm not against displays like this, right? I've been known to participate in Quran burning and shooting a Quran with a gun. So I'm not against the gesture. I'm just somewhat questioning how genuine she was. When I'm Secretary of State, I'll burn all books that are grooming, indoctrinating, and sexualizing our children. Well, I would be against any books that are grooming, indoctrinating, and sexualizing children as well. But why are you only targeting a handful of LGBT books? Tons and tons of books sexualize children, most of them in a heterosexual way. I think it's highly inappropriate. I think it shouldn't be in schools. But why are you only targeting a small percentage of the problem rather than all of the books that are the problem? Probably because you're trying to get people outraged and call you homophobic. That's probably why you're doing this. Now, her other video, I'm just going to say before I read the description, I find this video to be highly inappropriate and worthy of all the condemnation it received. So in one of her most notable videos that's received well over 5 million views was endorsement of capital punishment for illegal aliens who commit sexual assault. Firing a pistol, Gomez blew the head off of a mannequin that was tied to a chair outdoors. While firing the handgun, she shouted, "It's that simple. Public executions for any illegal that rapes or kills," it says "and American." I think that's supposed to say "an American." "They don't deserve deportation. They deserve to be ended." Now, let me say, first of all, that I think that rape is possibly the worst crime in existence, possibly, arguably worse than murder. I certainly think that rape should be severely, severely punished. However, a person taking a gun and shooting a mannequin, which is obvious representation of a human being, does not say that we should have a legal process that severely punishes, possibly including with capital punishment, rape. Also, rape is equally horrible whether it's coming from an American citizen or an illegal immigrant or a legal non-citizen. Rape is rape, right? The problem is the rape. The problem isn't that they were an illegal immigrant. in her words. And by the way, illegal immigrants are far less likely to commit crimes, other than obviously the crime of being here illegally, than citizens. Why? Because they know they're in danger, right? They know that they can be deported at any time, so they're very careful not to commit crimes. There is not a cohort of illegal aliens, illegal immigrants going around raping people. That's not a thing. It's just not a thing. And when you take a gun and you shoot a mannequin, what are you actually saying? What is the message you're actually sending? That you should take justice into your own hands, grab a gun, and shoot someone who's an illegal immigrant. That is the message her video is sending. She can justify it by saying, oh, I was just demonstrating capital punishment. Bullshit. You were telling people to kill illegal immigrants, which is highly, highly, highly inappropriate. I will not stand for that in any way. So if I'm a radical right-wing nutcase, would I be saying this? Would I be saying this? Would I be condemning this horrific video she did? I would never take a mannequin of a Muslim, dress it up, take a mannequin, dress it up like a Muslim, and shoot it with a gun. That's outrageous, ridiculous, highly inappropriate. And I'm only talking about the US here. I'm not talking about the UK. But just so you know, the rape gangs are in the UK legally. They're not there illegally. So their legal status doesn't really even enter into that equation. Yeah, exactly my thought, Nissan Attic. Aggravated cases of rape can easily be worse than murder, but I think the idea that rape is inherently worse has the implication that victims are permanently broken. Fair enough. Like I said, arguably. My point wasn't that rape is worse than murder. My point was that I think that rape is a horrific, horrific, horrific crime. One of the worst things that someone can do to another human being. And yet I still find this highly inappropriate. Because what you're actually doing is you're actually demonstrating someone killing someone with their own gun. You're not demonstrating the legal process by which someone goes through a trial, is found guilty, and then serves a punishment appropriate to the level of guilt. Alexander says, I thought her stunt was cool, at the Capitol, which I agree with. I think the stunt was pretty cool, actually. But she's kind of unhinged, yeah. She's definitely unhinged. So continuing with the article here, Gomez coined the phrase, don't be weak and gay, using it to criticize various politicians, blast out other public figures, and castigate liberal ideology. She's now selling t-shirts alongside with a slew of other phrases familiar with her followers. So that was one of the other things she garnered attention for. So in the backlash of the book burning, her response was, I stand behind it, don't be weak and gay. Which I also find inappropriate, frankly, because while I am completely and totally against homosexual acts, I don't think that being gay makes you weak or being heterosexual makes you strong. That's just ridiculous nonsense, right? You're not weak or strong based on your sexual choices. And by the way, most heterosexuals in the United States also engage in inappropriate sexual behavior, which is roughly akin to gay people having sex. That would be heterosexual sex outside of marriage. So again, why the double standard here, right? Why the double standard? Why are you only attacking gay people? Right. Oh, right. Because you're trying to get attention. You're trying to provoke people, not because you actually care about these issues. That's my opinion. When asked about her assertive and profane method of communication online, Gomez told the Texan, I mean every word and every sentence I make. My statements have endured the test of time. People are sick of polished lies. My brashness cuts through the noise. Texas respects straight talk, and I deliver it. That's why millions watch and follow. Well, millions definitely have watched your videos. However, again, in the Republican primary of the Missouri Senate, when all these videos had been highly watched, you got 7.5% of the vote, 7.7, I think, to be precise, which means of the total population, you got less than 4% of the vote. You didn't even get as many votes as you got views on your videos. So are all these people watching actually standing behind you? Do they actually agree with you? Or are they just watching a train wreck? Because people like to watch train wrecks. A lot of the most popular personalities online are people who everyone agrees are horrible human beings, but they watch them because they like the train show. Trainwreck. Most of Gomez's social media following is on X, where she's missed 400,000 followers on the platform. She's collected nearly 90,000 followers on Instagram until Meta shut down on both her Instagram and Facebook accounts in September 2024. Shame on you, Facebook. You shouldn't have shut down her accounts. She's entitled to free speech. If, like, for example, the execution video was posted on Facebook, then absolutely they had every right to remove that video, but I don't agree with shutting down her account. Pete says, I agree with such a far-right wing madman as Thaddeus. Clearly his Islamophobia has infected his thinking into being gayophobic and immigrant-ophobic. Yep, I'm very anti-gay and very anti-immigrant, as you can tell from my comments about Gomez. All right, at least one more important issue here. Her previous employer, Nestle Purina Pet Care, departed ways with Gomez in June 2024, allegedly due to disagreements over frequent use of weak and gay and other controversial posts online, particularly the one involving books and the blowtorch. Wonder what this person's employers, the Nestle-owned pet company Purina, so Purina is the company, but it's owned by Nestle. That's why Nestle Purina Pet Care. Thinks of these ads by a 24-year-old finance employee who's running in Missouri GOP primary. An individual has posted on X in April 23, sharing Gomez's book burning video. So she ends up being fired from her employer, from her job as a finance employee, a financial analyst perhaps, because of the controversial statements she made, in particular her remarks of weak and gay and her remarks, and the book burning stuff, basically. At least that's what's alleged. I think that I'm almost certain she was fired before the execution video was published. So it couldn't be based on that. It has to be based on things prior to that. Now, I know a thing or two about being fired for controversial statements here. So first, let me talk about the legality. Can Nestle fire her based on her political views? They can. Can they fire her based on actual hate speech? If they can prove actual hate speech, they can fire her based on actual hate speech. I don't think the phrase "weak and gay" constitutes hate speech. I think it's inappropriate. I don't think you should say that, but I don't think it constitutes hate speech. I don't think that burning books constitutes hate speech. So if they fired her based on hate speech, I don't think that they meet the legal standard for hate speech. If, however, they fired her for other reasons, and it's just an allegation that it was based on her political career and her public statements, then obviously that would be justified. So we don't know why they fired her. All we know is that people speculate that she was fired for these reasons. So 2 months after she was fired, she posted a video standing in front of the Purina building, during which she fired the company that she'd been employed for almost 3 years. Go woke, go broke. The company tried to keep me quiet for speaking up against the pornographic material in our children's libraries, and today I fired them. And Snoopy's right? Employers can fire their employees for such inappropriate speech and how it reflects on them, especially since she's, a public figure here, right? She's saying these statements publicly. It looks bad for the company. And as near as I can tell, they actually didn't fire her right away, right? So she made the inflammatory remarks in April 2023. She continued to be employed till June of 2024. To me, it feels like that they're not probably related. So probably the company disciplined her and said, don't do that type of thing after April 2023. And she continued to ruffle feathers for another year before they fired her. So I don't know. I mean, I don't really even feel like she has much case of being discriminated against, let alone legally discriminated against. So to be legally discriminated against, they'd have to fire her for her religious views, not her political views. So even if they discriminated against her because of her political views, she still wouldn't have a case legally speaking. But I don't even think they did that. And if they fired her because of, and there's no indication whatsoever that they fired her because of her religious views. Compare that to my case, right? And Pete says that her speech is, hateful in rhetoric, whereas mine is not. And by the way, right, just to show how anti-immigrant I am. By the way, I never ever blame any person who's in the country illegally. Most of the time, people here illegally have one of two things. Either they've come here because they think America's awesome and they want a better life and they're willing to do that at any cost, or they've been victimized and they are here as the result of human trafficking. Neither of those are reasons to say that someone is a monster, someone's a criminal, etc., etc. Whatever you feel about illegal immigration, whatever you feel should happen to people who are here illegally, understand that the people who are here because not because they hate America and they want it destroyed, but they're here either because they're victims of human trafficking or because they love America. Those are the possibilities, right? Those are the possibilities of why someone would choose to come here. Again, not making a political statement, putting the facts out there so you can make your own decisions about it. And if people unsubscribe from this, whatever, I don't give a crap. I want to be fair. I want to be real about the situation. I don't want to spew a bunch of rhetoric. So was she fired illegally? I don't think so. Now, was her brother fired illegally? Also not the case because he's working for a Democrat who is elected as mayor of some city. I forgot the city, doesn't matter. And he's supporting her campaign. Obviously, he's supporting her campaign because he is her brother. However, does the Democrat mayor who really want people working under him who support inflammatory Republicans? No, he doesn't, and he has the legal right to fire him. I don't think he should have. I don't think it's moral, but does he have the legal right? Of course he does. And then she says, no amount of stock or bullying will make me compromise my values. I never support a company that wants to empower and protect pedophiles and groomers in our schools and libraries. Feed your dog something that is not weak and gay. This is good versus evil. Yeah, Purina is not going around supporting groomers and pedophiles just because they don't want your insane rhetoric associated with them. That's just nonsense. And Purina didn't respond for comment. And then, okay, so it does get into the details. Her brother was mayor aide to Democratic Mayor Stephen Fulop of Jersey City. And he was fired because he donated to a political campaign, which is public record, by the way. And you should be wise enough to know that if you're making political donations, and you work for someone who opposes, not just like they're personally opposed, but like in the political system or on the other side, yeah, there might be consequences to that. Crooked mayor of Jersey City, Stephen Fulop, illegally fired my brother for financially supporting my campaign. So now Jersey City taxpayers will have to pay millions for electing a tyrannical and corrupt mayor who violates constitutional rights. I will never let these politicians take away our First and Second Amendments, Gomez says, explaining a post she made on X, saying she was headed to federal court. I mean, she can go to federal court all she wants. It's not illegal to discriminate against someone based on their political views. And it's certainly not illegal for a Democrat to say that all of the people who work under them needs to be Democrats. Just like it's not illegal for Trump to say that everyone in his administration must be a loyal Republican. Strangely, It's perfectly okay for Trump to fire all the people who he doesn't feel are loyal Republicans, but when a Democrat fires someone they don't think is a loyal Democrat, that's illegal and against the Constitution, according to hypocrite Valentina. That's and then finally, she was defeated by now Missouri Secretary of State Denny Hoskins in the Republican primary in August of 2024. She collected 48,000 votes. 48 whole thousand votes is what she ended up coming in sixth place of a field of 8 candidates. So she managed to beat 2 people by all the attention she garnered. But what did that attention coordinate into? 48,000 votes. Doesn't seem like very many people watching her videos actually support her. And she garnered a total of $28,000 of donations, which is absolutely nothing in American politics. I bet you the guys who finished 7th and 8th probably had a similar amount of donation despite zero public attentions. $28,000 is absolutely nothing. So is she this like superhero, super popular figure that she portrays herself to be? No, she's just a crazy nut job. The article goes on and says that she's now moved to Texas and she's challenging a long-term Texas Republican in the primary for the 31st district. I would say she'll have similar results. She'll get 7% of the vote among Republicans and continue to post videos that get lots of views, but actually are just all about getting her attention. That's my opinion. I think she was right about Islam. I think that was kind of a cool stunt to do, but make no mistake about it. It was a stunt. It was to get her attention. It was for her political campaign. It was not because of any great care for the truth of Christianity and the falsity of Islam or something along those lines. It was all about herself and getting herself attention. So good question from Moss here. What constitutes hate speech? So this is not going to be precise, but the legal definition is basically inciting violence against a group based on their ethnic, religious, sexual community, whatever, any group status, but based on their status as part of a particular group, inciting violence against them, or making blatantly false stereotypical comments that incite hatred by others. So it's either inciting violence or speech intended to make people hate something that are blatantly false. So, for example, a comment that illegal immigrants are rapists and murderers would be hate speech because it's inciting hate against illegal immigrants based on a blatantly untrue statement. Because statistically speaking, illegal immigrants may commit less violent crimes than citizens of the United States. Or, for example, saying something like, someone should kill that guy because he's gay. That would be hate speech because you're inciting violence to someone against someone based on a characteristic they hold, not based on anything else. So that's what would constitute actual hate speech. By the way, I did nothing remotely resembling either of those things. I certainly didn't incite violence against anyone, ever. Speak up regularly against inciting violence. And the hateful comments I made were, I'm a fan of Robert Spencer. How is that exactly causing hate against a group? I don't know. And calling Ali Dawa and a couple of Muslim and non-Muslim YouTubers crackhead clown individuals by repeating Ali Dawa's words back to them, which obviously is not inciting hatred against a group based on some false statement. No person would seriously think that I believe that anyone I described is actually addicted to crack cocaine or is actually puts on makeup and becomes a clown. And two, it's not about a group based on their characteristics. I didn't say Muslims are crackhead clowns, despite what the Columbus Dispatch published. That is not what I said. I said the videos we watched today were produced by crackhead clowns. Why did I say that? Because their videos were ridiculously and stupid. It had nothing to do with their religious beliefs. Again, some of them weren't even Muslims. Some of them were self-professed Christians who are investigating Islam. So there you go. I applied for this job, moderator, to get a bit less censored by YouTube, and Thaddeus was so kind as to hire me as a mod. I mean, well, you know, that was just because I was discriminatory and was hiring you because you are a anti-Muslim bigot, and I only support anti-Muslim bigots. But strangely, I don't support Valentina. I think that she's a nutcase who is all about attention and doesn't actually care about the things that she says she is advocating for. That's my opinion of her. Let's take a couple comments from the audience. I missed the vast majority of chat. When I don't have a guest, I can't really read the chat and talk at the same time. But Damon said trans kids don't exist. They're manufactured. There, I said it. I agree. I want to be clear here, though, because I always go based on evidence. And the evidence suggests that the transgender identity is a real thing. It's not like someone making it up or just choosing it for the heck of it. I would say it is a mental illness, very similar to anorexia. What is anorexia? Anorexia is a mental illness where you have a self-image of the size of your body, in this case, that does not match reality, that you think you're very fat when you're not. What is transgender? Transgender is I have a mental image of myself as a female when I'm biologically male or vice versa. I think that it's a real mental condition, but the treatment for an anorexic is not to say, oh, you know, you're right, you're actually fat. Right? The treatment for an anorexic is to say you're wrong, right? You have a mental image of your body that doesn't match reality, and that should be the treatment for transgender as well. Is counseling, is support, is help to come to a healthy image of what you are. Right? If you're biologically male, then you're a man. If you're biologically female, then you're a man. I don't think that, you know, transgender people are evil and deserve to die or anything else. I just think that the correct response to it isn't to say, affirm that, yes, your mental image is correct, right? Yeah, psychological condition. And as far as I know, it's still officially classified that by the AMA, American Medical Association, although they may, or probably American Psychological Association, although they may have changed their definition in the last couple of years. I'm not 100% up to date on that, but it certainly was classified, transgender was classified as a mental psychological condition in the past. And I think that that is correct. Likewise, I think that people who identify as homosexual, for the most part, right? I mean, there can always be exceptions. Same with transgender. There can be exceptions. There can be people who choose this image of themselves for other reasons. But I think that by and large, people don't choose to be attracted to people of the same sex. But you know what? Pedophiles don't choose to be attracted to children either. That doesn't make it okay. That doesn't make it all right. What is the problem? And should the treatment be? Well, the problem is a psychological condition, a demonstrably real, scientifically demonstrably real difference in their mental makeup, the way the chemicals fire in your brain that makes you weird, right? That makes you different than other people. And the problem isn't being different, right? Well, everyone's different in some way or another. The problem is affirming something which is dangerous and self-harming, right? Just as everyone acknowledges that pedophilia, well, I shouldn't say everyone, but 99.9% of people recognize that pedophilia is not acceptable, shouldn't be practiced because it hurts someone. The same is actually true about changing your gender or having sex with someone of the same gender, or for that matter, having sex with anyone outside of marriage. It's wrong and it's damaging to the self and it shouldn't be encouraged. I actually don't hate, don't come within a million miles of hating any of these people. What I oppose is people pretending like it's normal and there's nothing wrong with it. That's what I oppose. All right. Demon Souls triggered who ate the apple? And the answer is you ate the apple. And John Wilson gave a super chat. Let's see if I finally fixed this. And I did not. All right, I'll manually play it again. I don't understand. It works in my tests, and then we go live, and then it doesn't work. I'll review the log and figure out what happened here. But in the interim, give me 1 second to pull it up manually. It looks like I didn't even add it to the queue this time, which is interesting. I wonder if maybe, well, we'll see. We'll see what happened. I might have accidentally left the test one that I made in place. But thank you for the donation and thank you for allowing me to get more data on why this is not working. Oh, that's the wrong directory. That's why I can't find it. Let's see if it generated at all. Oh, okay, so it didn't generate. Wait, no, it did. It did generate. Yeah, 408. That's definitely it. So it generated. I'll get it added to the stream here. And I'll attempt again to figure out why this is not working. But it works every time in my stupid tests. So there's like something about like so many people commenting or something that's throwing it off. I don't know. Anyway, here you go.
Reason Answers is my favorite channel.
Thank you very much, John Wilson. And apparently, Reason Answers is the favorite channel of the ape apologist. Weird Stuff says it says medicine. So going back to where that guy was talking about the contributions of Islam or Muslims to human knowledge. It says medicine, so they make vast contributions to human medicine. Camel urine, anyone? Camel urine? Ajwadates? I just can't stop laughing, man. Muslims and medicine, haha. Well, that's only scratching the surface of it. So you just don't understand just how much Muslims have contributed to medical knowledge. So much so that there are books by Muslims, for Muslims, on all the medical advice of Muhammad. And some of it's a lot more terrible than, say, camel urine. I mean, camel urine is pretty disgusting, but it probably doesn't like actually massively harm you. And ajwadates are, of course, harmless. They just won't prevent you from poison. But he makes suggestions like women who are pregnant shouldn't breastfeed their children, which before modern times resulted in the deaths of countless infants because there wasn't formula that could be used to substitute for breast milk. Breast milk was the only essential food of infants, and Muhammad said not to provide it for infants because you'll steal from the baby in the womb if you do that. And on and on and on. He has tons and tons of ridiculous medical advice. Points thing usually has a number in front. I don't know what that means, Carol. I think you're trying to help me. Oh, oh no. I think you're saying like the cat here. Is that what you're saying? So different things are triggered different ways. The ones that are triggered just on your screen, you don't have to use a keyword. You can just type cat, and that'll trigger cat. But the ones that use points, I think that's what Carol was trying to say. The ones that cost you points, they have either an exclamation point or a number sign. Generally, both will work to prevent you from accidentally triggering it. Yeah, so there you go. DW and his group showed just how silly Muhammad's medicine was during Islamicize Me. That was one of the things they covered in that series, for sure. Medical contribution to the world. That is Islam. Yeah. Now he wanted the Texas State House to officially recognize that. They did not, but the Muslim wanted them. One of two elected Muslim officials in Texas wanted that. So there you go. And make the frog straight again. There you go. Yeah, there aren't chemicals in the water that are causing people to become gay. It is a human condition that has existed since ancient times. There have always been. Now, let me clarify. There's always been people who are attracted to people of the same gender. And there's always people who've practiced homosexual sex. However, the idea of a homosexual identity is a modern conception that would be foreign to the ancient world. The idea that my identity is I'm a homosexual is not something that has existed throughout human history. I don't think we ever managed to summon the dog. Yeah, you didn't summon the dog. Let me see what's going on there. It should be. Close. Did it do any actions today? It might not have done any actions today. I don't know. I should be able to check the history. For some reason, I'm not seeing it though. That's weird. Oh, there it is. Action history. Yeah, it looks like maybe the actions weren't working today. I think the actions might not be working at all, actually. Other than the points ones, because the points ones are triggered differently. I think that the other ones might not be working. Dog, cat. Man, I can't type. Yeah, the points ones will work. I think the other ones aren't working today. Interesting. I probably just need to shut it down and restart it. But whatever, we're signing off anyway. So I guess those weren't working today. They'll be back next time. Apparently, so what happens sometimes is the free ones are run by a third-party program, and what happens sometimes is it loses connection, but it doesn't know it lost connection. So I think it's just not monitoring the chat and not seeing them, and that's why it's not triggering them. Anyway, thank you for joining us today. Obviously, I know you're all right-wing nutcases, just like me or something, because, well, you think that Islam is false, right? That's the extent of our crimes. I will be back on Friday. We'll be talking about Muhammad Hijab. We'll be looking, most likely, we'll definitely be talking about him, but most likely we'll be looking at his second response video released on his Not Hijab channel, which is totally him, which he fakes a whole bunch of stuff. He in his desperation, he has now faked a whole bunch of voice notes and other things supporting the fact that Aisha was never married. Supposedly she admitted it. It's utterly ridiculous. Anyway, we'll be looking at that next time I'm live with Mary. Valentina Gomez is a nut job because she's calling for the death penalty for pedophiles, rapists, and against Muslims that follow Islamic ideology that calls for the death of Christians. That's not why crazy. You're misrepresenting me. Don't do that. That doesn't do your side any favors by misrepresenting who she is and what she's done and why I said that she's a nut job. Okay? I don't think she actually cares about any of that stuff. I think that the only thing she cares about is drawing attention to herself. That's why she's a nutcase, because she does things to draw attention to herself that are outrageous and stupid and encourage murder of people because they happen to look like illegal immigrants. Okay? I don't care if you agree with me or not. Do not misrepresent me. Be fair. Be fair. That's what I tried to do. I try to be fair. Don't just say because someone has an R next to their name or because someone has a D next to their name, they're always right or they're always wrong. Because the reality is, every Republican makes stupid statements. Every Democrat makes stupid statements. Every Republican sometimes says things that are true. Every Democrat sometimes says things that are true. And politics in the United States isn't about truth. It isn't about good people. It is about us versus them. And I am against that. I am against us versus them politics. And I don't care if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat. Either way, I will call you out on that. We'll be back on Friday for Mary. I'll have Bubba study on Friday as well, possibly streaming other times. Yesterday, I was in court. And there'll be a video update on that as to why. But just a hint, it wasn't because I was arrested for hate speech or something like that. Marianne says, Mrs. Friendly Ex-Muslim has posted a very interesting analysis of the Ali Dal Aisha interview on YouTube. It's hereby recommended. I highly recommend that as well. Until we meet again, let's close out with the words of Pastor Jake.
Pray this ceaselessly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have